Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Apologies for the delay. We had a little bit of difficulty with the passcode. We're going to wait a couple more minutes for other people to join us. In the meantime, if you have any questions, if that you need to communicate, send us via the chat or the Q&A panel box. We will be right with you. I see that we have started getting attendees, so that's great. Just a couple of minutes to allow everyone to join. We had approximately 80 people register for the webcast. So we're really excited and looking forward to see the students and the questions, and hopefully this will be a good engagement opportunity for all of you. If at any time you have a question, you can also raise your hand. At the bottom of your screen of the window, there is a toolbar, and it has a hand, the Q&A and the chat button, so that you can send us any questions or any comments that way. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. Okay, we're up to 34 attendees. I'm gonna wait just 2 more minutes. And again, apologies for the glitch in technology. Okay, so the count has stopped at 34, so I think we could get started. And then if we get more people, we can always share the presentation and have the questions at the end. So Tiffany, thank you so much for your patience, and I will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Sophie, and welcome to the Society of Actuaries virtual university outreach event to KFUPM. We are excited to be here and share a little bit about the SOA, our exams, tools, and resources available to candidates, and more importantly, answer questions from you. Thank you to the Actuarial Science Club for this invitation, and especially to Ali Alali, who is the leader of the Actuarial Science Club. Ali, can you please take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Tiffany. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the inconvenience that happened due to some issues. Tonight at the Actuarial Club at KFUPM, we are honored to host the Society of Actuaries. I would like to thank the SOA for their efforts as they help the new students to be more engaged and aware of the requirements and what it takes to be an actuary. A few weeks ago, with cooperation of the SOA, we have launched the Saudi Society of Actuaries, which indicates to the development taking place in the region. Tonight, our speakers are going to talk about resources, pathways, and exams. Then hopefully we will have an open discussion where the audience are welcome to ask their questions. Thank you, Tiffany.
Great, and thank you so much for the warm welcome, Ali. Now, I would like to introduce you to our panelists for today. So we have with us Jose DeRoy, Mahmoud Almaki, and Andy Peterson. And my name is Tiffany Tatsumi, and I'm the academic administrator for the Society of Actuaries. And I manage various university and academic related projects and programs at the SOA. Andy Peterson is also joining me from the SOA. Andy, could you say a few words about yourself and then pass things along to our featured actuaries to introduce themselves?
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. So my name, as Tiffany said, my name is Andy Peterson. I direct our SOA's international activities. So anything outside of the US and Canada falls under my responsibilities. And so I'm happy to be participating with you today. And I'm pleased, and I can't always say this, but I'm pleased that I've actually been able to visit your university. And so I may have met a few of you a little over a year ago. That was actually my last international trip before the pandemic caused us to not be able to travel internationally or really travel much at all. So I was very pleased to be able to visit your university and meet your professors and meet some of you. And so I'm excited to again be able to present and get to renew our acquaintance and talk with you in this context. So thank you for this opportunity and thank you for attending tonight. Jose, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm definitely happy to be with you all today and think about this session as being for you and not necessarily for me or for us. And when I say that is, I want to give you as broad of a picture of what an actuary, the role of an actuary, the kind of work we can do. And I was fortunate enough to do, I would say, to do a few things. So I'm going to share them with you just to give you a sense of what could be ahead of you. So I'm French Canadian. I'm a Canadian citizen, and I wanted to have an international career. So I started in pension consulting in Toronto with Willis Towers Watson. And after that, I wanted to switch to insurance. So I moved to France and I worked for a French insurance company who had operations in the UK, in the US, and in Canada. So at that time, they valued that expertise, and that got me the chance to move from consulting to insurance. While I was in France, I was an internal auditor. So I went from being a consultant to an internal auditor. And that got me into a mission, which was non-life, and it was on the reinsurance market in London. It was the aviation market. And having a taste of the reinsurance, it got me to move to New York, where I worked for Swiss Re and eventually so I joined Swiss Re Life and Health, and that was I was a pricing marketing actuary, and it was focusing on retirement products that were offered in the US insurance market. Now, at that time, there was a merger of Swiss Re and another company, and basically AXA, a big French organization, got the whole team to move to join them. So essentially, I did 5 years of reinsurance, but with 2 companies. Now, after these 5 years in New York in the reinsurance market, a recruiter in Europe got me back to Europe, and that was in Luxembourg. And at that time, I became the chief actuary and chief risk officer. So adding the risk hat to my management team. And it was to focus on the opening of bigger European markets in terms of retirement. So it got me engaged with Poland, the Scandinavian markets, Italy, Germany, France, the Benelux. So after a few years in Luxembourg, they decided nationwide that US companies, because all the American companies were expanding globally, decided to sell. So I was involved in selling the US companies and eventually working with the investment bankers. So as I was working with the investment bankers, I said, you know what, it looks like there was a role for actuaries there. So at that time, I had the opportunity to move to Japan. I had an offer to continue in product development for retirement product in Japan, or move back. And usually I would never move back to a city where I've been, but I said, you know what, moving back to New York, there's always something happening in New York. So I said, okay, I'll go back to New York and I'll join banking. So I went back to a familiar space, but a non-familiar environment. So I joined banking with BNP Paribas, French bank, and eventually HSBC. And it was at the time as what they wanted is they realized that actuaries were getting more and more involved with capital market solutions, whether it was hedging, developing hedging program, M&A, merger and acquisition, transactions, and so forth. So I did that for a few years. And then following the crisis, MetLife basically acquired all of AIG international operations but China. So it was the third time in my career that MetLife reached out to me. And they said, Jose, now we're becoming a more and more global organization. We need global actuaries. Would you like to join? And then I joined and I went back to insurance after being in banking for a few years. And I was the chief actuary for all annuities in the US. Then I got the business that they had in Japan, and eventually we created a reinsurance company in Bermuda where I was the chief actuary on that. So I did that for a few years. And after that, as you know, it's all about technology nowadays. So the IBM was looking for actuaries. And when I say looking for actuaries is initially IBM's client base were the actuaries. And when I say that, it's way before my time, it's way before your time, because IBM is a 100+ years company. But they wanted, the actuaries needed the computer power to do those, to do the heavy calculation. So the IBM relationship started with the actuaries, and after that, it migrated towards call center, more operations, call centers, data processing, and so forth. So when I applied, they said, okay, Jose, we need somebody to connect the actuaries with the new technology, and the new technology, big data, AI, machine learning, and so forth. So you know that. So you have to understand what we have, what technology can offer. And now let's make the two, I would say the two meet. And that was the days of blockchain and all that effort. And when I joined IBM, interestingly enough, they sent me back to Europe. And they sent me back this time in Amsterdam. And it was with trade credit insurance. So not even life, not even non-life, but trade credit. And it was related to all the, I would say, shipping and I would say import-export market where payments needs to be insured and reinsured in the event that one goes under default or if it cannot deliver on the goods. So I did this end-to-end transformation, and that basically opened my eyes to technology. And now, as you can see, it says Savvy Service Inc. Is after that, I decided that I should create my own company. And now my own company, I'm spending time between Canada and the US. And I'll leave it at this because then I may answer questions that you may have or that Tiffany may have going forward. So all of that to say that I've given you a long introduction. It's not because I'm 100 years old. I've done a few things, but just to give you an appreciation that if you want, you can, it's a profession that can give you, if you want to, and you find the employer is willing to give you a chance, you can get a lot of opportunity to do different things and reinvent yourself a few times. So how's that? So I think, Mahmoud, your turn.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mahmoud Al-Malki. I am delighted to be here with you today. A very quick introduction about myself. I am an associate at the Society of Actuaries. I am currently the head of Actuarial here at WUBA Arabia, where I have been working here since graduations for around 6 years. Most importantly, I was graduated from this university, King Fahd University. So it's really good to be back, at least virtually for now. And I have been in your shoes. I had tons and tons of questions. So as everyone said, this session is for you. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you can. Thank you so much.
And if there's one thing that I can add, Mahmoud is working for a health insurer. That's the only thing I haven't been involved. So who knows? Yeah. You may hire me at some point. But I suspect the students are much better than me. So
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for your introductions. I think our audience has learned a lot so far, and I'm excited to, get going to, learn a little bit more as well. So before we get started, I'd like to just review the Zoom features regarding your options for communicating with us during the question portion of the event. So you'll notice that you have an audio settings menu available, and here you can adjust your speakers and your microphone settings if you plan to ask a question later on. You will be muted for the duration of the presentation, but you can choose to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question out loud using your microphone at the end of the event. Should this be the case, we will provide you with a prompt to unmute you, and then you can freely ask your question. Or if you choose, you may instead use the Q&A window to submit a question to the hosts or send a chat message with your question. You can also use the chat feature to communicate with us if you have any technical difficulties, and you'll receive direct assistance during the event. We will save all event questions for the end of the webinar. And with that, I'll hand things back to Jose to provide an overview of the SOA.
Yeah, the overview that I want to give you here is basically the SOA is going through, and Andy will definitely talk more about that, but the SOA is going through a long-term growth strategy plan, and the strategies for success are the points that I just raised. Clearly education, actual research, professional development, member engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I got elected to the board this last fall in 2020, and my first two mandates, and by the way, on the board, there's 15 of us, so we're all allocated to different, I would say, section. And my two sections are education and international. So today's event fits perfectly in my two mandates because it's an education through you. And Andy, Tiffany, and Sophie inviting me as the international board liaison member. There's a few of us. But so that's what we're going to be covering today. Now, as an actuary myself, it is my own, I would say, my own responsibility to keep up with the profession. So I have to continue educate myself, and that's where the Society of Actuaries is helping in putting all sorts of resources with respect to professional development. Now, in terms of member engagement, then it's totally up to us. And when I say up to us, Mahmoud is one of them, I'm one of them, and it's to be engaged with our community. So as a board member, well, first of all, when I decided to run to become a board member, clearly I was going to commit myself for a 3-year engagement with this Society of Actuaries. And today is taking some time to get to know you better and participate in today's event. So that's where, in terms of helping, or I would say chipping into the strategies for success for the SOA, that's where I come into play. Now, one thing, so if we look at the membership here, as you can see, it's growing, and it's growing in a very interesting manner. Okay, in terms of members, so Mahmoud and I are in the first pie, and you are all in the second pie. So I fit 2 boxes, depending where I am. I'm in the US and Canada. But interestingly enough, what we can see is the rest of the world is where you are fitting, and clearly it's growing. So the Society of Actuaries is recognizing that, and therefore you have the chance of gaining from the experience that the SOA and the members have. So as the world is getting more and more global, you have, if I may say, it's totally up to you, but you'll have access to resources from the SOA should you continue to pursue the exam and all, I would say, all the steps to move from one pie to the other pie. And from one pie to the other pie is what Andy is going to cover, and it's going to be through education. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, Jose. Now, we're going to get a little bit into what an actuary is. So we heard a lot about Jose's various roles, across the world, different roles that she has filled in her time as an actuary. But I'd like to ask each of our panelists what your definition of an actuary is. So Mahmoud, let's start with you. So when somebody asks, what is an actuary? How do you explain that to them?
Yeah, an actuary is someone who is technically strong, and have a great ability and understanding of the insurance sector and the business. So combining and bridging the best of the two worlds. It's very important that to be someone who can able to communicate effectively, because if we do a lot of sophisticated analysis and we weren't able to communicate it clearly, then there is no good use of that. So it's very important that we communicate effectively the result to help insurance companies to mitigate the risk or to sustain profitability. So it's really about three pillars. It's about communication, about technical skills, as well as a deep understanding of the insurance sector. Yeah.
And then, you know, people that don't really know what an actuary is or aren't involved in the profession may have some ideas about, you know, what an actuary does. I guess, how is the profession perceived by outsiders? And are there any misconceptions that you'd like to dispel about what people think actuaries are and do?
Sometimes they think of us as individual who sometimes overcomplicate things, and we are very technical, which is true in a sense that we are technical, but it's not true that we tend to overcomplicate things. Sometimes we do it unintentionally, but it's very important. Actually, our role comes to break down very complicated things, very unknown things to the management and to the audience of the insurance companies. So our role actually is to simplify things using our technical skills as well as our understanding instead of making it more complicated.
I think that's a really good way to sum things up. You know, we're going to return back to our actuaries with more questions, but for now, let's move things over to Andy to talk a little bit about the SOA pathway.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. So I hope that many of you are familiar, at least to a certain degree, with our pathway already, but I don't want to assume that either. So I want to present some of the basics about our pathway and our process for becoming an associate, an ASA, an associate of the Society of Actuaries. And on the screen, we're showing the pathway, and this information is available on our website. You can see the link there down below. And basically, the way we've set it up is that there's not necessarily a strict rule of this exam precedes that exam, but you basically want to move from the left to the right as you're thinking about taking exams. And the things that are in blue are the exams, while the green are what we call VEE, or Validation by Educational Experience. And what that means is that if you take a course in that topic, then often that's the way that you get credit for that. You don't have to take an exam. You show us that you've taken a course. And the good thing for those of you, all of you who are students at King Fahd University, is that you have courses that have been approved to cover all the VEE topics, the economics, the accounting and finance, as well as the mathematical statistics. So that information is available on our website. Again, you can find that by looking at the links and the ways that you get credit for that. Basically, you just need an acceptable score on your coursework in those particular courses, and you send that to the SOA, and then we give you credit for that in our system. But then on top of that, you have the exams. So they start at the what we consider the introductory level, topics like financial mathematics and probability, then moving on to investments and financial mathematics, and then getting into the more actuarial topics, dealing with what we call long-term actuarial mathematics that deals with insurances or topics that have a long contingency, like life insurance or pensions that have a long tail with them, or also short-term actuarial mathematics, which is really the things that would be insurances or products that are every year that you renew. For example, the types of work that Mahmoud would do in his health insurance area, or what we call general insurance or property casualty insurances for cars or your home or things like that you would renew on every year basis. We also have a series of online modules that are what we include in the fundamentals of actuarial practice. So rather than actually having a period of studying and then taking an exam, these are really online modules that you work your way through. There's some project-based work in there and kind of an assessment at the end, but essentially, or project at the end, but it's not like an examination like some of the other things. And then we have a predictive analytics test, which is again a series of modules with an assessment at the end. So it's kind of a mix of different approaches. So one of the things we like to see is that there are different approaches for testing, and some of the initial tests are very, very mathematical, multiple choice sort of orientation. But as we're shifting, we're providing different testing methods, different ways to assess your knowledge. And that will continue to change in the future as we try and make sure that our system is up to date. It's reflecting the knowledge that actuaries need to know today, not just what they need to know 10 or 15 years ago, and that we're using good current methods for assessment. So I think those are some of the key things. Tiffany, anything I've missed from this slide that you like to make sure I cover?
I think you covered it pretty well. I especially like to hit upon how, universities, will have VEE, for example, that will help support a student's progression through the pathway prior to graduation. And, just that link, I think, is very good too. If you visit that link, this pathway actually turns into an interactive pathway that'll help you learn a little bit more about each component. So.
Yeah, and all these exams are offered through a computer-based testing approach. For those of you who've taken an exam, you're familiar with that. You sign up, you take it at a Prometric testing center. I'm happy to, report that there are Prometric test centers available in your city, and so that makes it relatively easy for you to do that. And so that's just the way we offer the exams, through a partnership with Prometric. So then the next area is, once you become an ASA or an associate of the Society of Actuaries, then you have the opportunity to move on and work towards becoming a fellow of the Society of Actuaries. And I know that's a designation that Jose has, that I have, and that's kind of where you really then sort of decide to specialize. So the associate is almost like a general education of what we think every actuary should know. And then at the fellowship level, we allow you to choose a specialty area. And that's really where you decide, well, do I want to work in pensions? Do I want to work in individual in life, in annuities? Do I want to work as a health insurance actuary? Do I want to work as a general insurance? And it can be a little confusing what all those specialties are, especially if you're just in university. This isn't the time where you need to make a decision about, well, which specialty track will I take? Because usually it would be extremely rare for university students to finish all the ASA exams. Maybe occasionally it happens, but it's very rare. And so usually it's based on where you work as your first employer or your second employer. That drives the kind of choice you make on which specialty track you decide to take. And then within the specialty tracks, there's a series, again, of exams. They tend to be a little bit more open-ended questions, as opposed to multiple choice types of questions, but trying to help you, do you understand concepts? Maybe some of them are a little less mathematical, just depends on the exam and on the track. There's some online modules. And there's also a professionalism component. Actually, we have that both on the associate side and the fellowship side. And it's important to understand that as an actuary, you are part of a profession. And being part of a profession means that there are requirements for continuing education, as well as ethical standards that you need to hold to. And that wasn't something that I think I fully understood, particularly as a university student, but even early in my career. But as I've spent more time and been an actuary for, well, almost 30 years now, I've come to appreciate much more the importance of the profession and the professionalism and understanding what it means to follow a set of standards and ethical business practices and all of that as sort of who we are as actuaries. So let me stop there, and I think we can probably move on to the next section.
Great, thanks, Andy. Now, so we've talked about the exam pathways, how to become an actuary, and we've heard a lot about exams. So computer-based testing exams, some open answer exams. Jose and Mahmoud, you've taken and passed exams. You have earned designations. So I'm wondering if you have any general study advice for students. Maybe Mahmoud, would you like to start?
Yeah, I have a lot of advices. I think the first one and the most important one is that when we study for these exams, we shouldn't make our sole objective is to pass the exams only, but trying to learn the material and appreciate the concepts to be able to use it in your skill set and in the workplace. So it's very critical that when you study for these exams, you do not study only to pass, but to learn as well. I know it doesn't sound very different, but you will try to understand the ideas in depth more, and you will be able to apply it, and you will be motivated when you know that you're going to use these concepts. Also, it's very important that when we study for these exams is to put our full energy, so to target a 10. Everyone knows that you need a 6 out of 10 to pass an exam. And I think most of students target 6 out of 10, and some of them fail because you will always fall short from your target. So always target a 10. If you get an 8, a 9, and 10, you will pass and you will learn the material. Also, it's very important that to understand yourself and understand what's the best way that you like to study. Some people are visual learners, some people like to read. When to study is very important. It's very critical that you make it into a routine. So if you study whenever you feel like it, or whenever you feel free, you will never find time to study, and you will not be consistent. So it's very important that you make it part of your routine. For me, I wake up every day, 5:30 in the morning. I study for 2 hours and then I go to work. So it's between my sleeping and my job. So it's very hard for me to miss it. It depends from one person to another. Some people like to study after work immediately. So it depends on you. Then you have the general advices, which most of us know it by now, which is to create a plan. And of course, you need to stick to that plan. It's very important the last month before the exam that you make it for practice and review. So the general tips, practice are the 3 keys to pass the exams. There is a final, a very important advice for me that it helped me a lot to pass the exams, which is to create your own summary of the material. And it's very important that you periodically review the material from start to finish. So what I do, let's say I have 5 months to study for an exam. When I start, every couple of weeks, I review the material from the beginning to end. So after the end of the first 2 weeks, I study the material that I studied in the first 2 weeks. After another 2 weeks, I study the material for the first 4 weeks, and so on. This way, the information will be fresh in your head when you get closer to the exams. That's it from my side.
Great. And Jose, so since you've earned your FSA, you have much experience with, a variety of different exams. So are there any specific exam taking techniques that you found helpful when sitting down at the testing center and sitting for your exams?
First of all, I would say it's very interesting because whether it was my days or Mahmoud's days, the techniques are the same. And just to add to what Mahmoud is just said is, yes, the exam, first of all, they're not easy. And I have to say they're not easy for anybody, because all of us were, if I may say, with humility, all of us are strong at math, we're good in math, and when you get to these exams, they can be a real challenge. So, and it's not simple. And as Mahmoud just said, when you go through the material, no matter what, you spend so much time on it that it truly helps you at work. So, to your point that it's important not just only to digest, and not only to read and memorize, you need to digest the material. So that's critical. And then learning about yourself, there's certainly some perseverance and patience. And I would say for you, just like me, I think for most of you, English is not your first language. So when you get to the fellowship, the exam are less mathematical in nature. So there's a lot more reading. So then you're killing two birds with the same stone because your English is going to get better. It's going to be a technical English that is not necessarily the one you've learned in school. And then you're going to get better and better in replying the answers to the exam. So if anything, if sometimes, because it does happen, that you may get a 5 or a 6, well, you can encourage yourself and say your English got better. And the person next to you, you know, who are native, they read the material quicker, they memorized it quicker, and they were able to write, you know, quicker as well. But at the end, you're going to be very proud of yourself. So, and then in terms of techniques, as Mahmoud said, there is the books. Then you get the summaries, and then you complete the summaries as you see fit. So you may want to create yourself some cue cards. I like what Mahmoud just said because it's true. By the time you get to the end, you don't remember what you read a month earlier. So it's good. The refresh, the every 2 weeks refresh is really good. And the other thing is, personally for myself, is it was one of those. If you decide that you study, you have to be consistent. So it's not like starting 7 months, 6 months, and just doing it once a week or two times a week. You have to be really dedicated. And for me, it was not the morning, it was the night. So after work, I would force myself to go to a library, but 2 hours, then eat, and then an hour after dinner. So as you'll see, the technique will evolve depending on the material and what you go through.
Great, thank you to both Mahmoud and Jose. All right, so it looks like we want to talk a little bit about the job market. So I'll pass things over to Mahmoud to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically the insurance sector here in Saudi Arabia is extremely immature. And the good thing that is it is rapidly developing, and I think we'll have a great future here with everyone doing their part. The profession is growing rapidly. I remember back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, or no, before that, 2012, the King Fahd University offered the major for the first time. Now we have tens of students who graduated already and over 100 who are still studying. There is a great opportunity in the market, and the market still growing rapidly. The good thing that SAMA, the central bank, recognizes the importance of the profession. And in March 2020, they issued a new actuarial work regulation, which support the profession greatly. First item was every insurance company will need to hire a fellow, whether Saudi or an expat, within 2 years, so up to March 2022. This is just to give room for the local Saudi students to complete the remaining of their exams, and then every insurance company will need to hire at least one Saudi fellow. And as of now, every insurance company should hire at least, or sorry, within 1 year. Yeah, so by now, every insurance company should have hired 3 Saudi actuarial students. We have around 30, if I'm not mistaken, 32 insurance companies. So in 7 years, there will be a guaranteed 32 minimum fellow positions, a leadership position, as well as a minimum of 100 actuarial students. So really, the insurance industry is counting on you guys. It's very important that we focus on our exams, our learning, we develop our communication skills through FAB. It was extremely helpful, and through experience. And I think there's a lot to be done in Saudi Arabia. Finally, SAMA required all the insurance companies to enable their actuarial employees by creating an exam or educational policy that mandate the study leaves, coverage of the cost, and so on, and to support them in terms of training and so on. So this is pretty much a summary of what's going on now in the market.
Great. And now we will move into talking a little bit about interviews and internships. So, when we're looking for a job, I'm wondering if Mahmoud and Jose, you can provide advice about what employers are looking for in an actuarial professional. So maybe Jose, do you want to, maybe you begin this one?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, I would say if you get the interview, that means you have a chance to get the job, because they look at your resume, they look at your grading, and the employer feel good about it. So I would say the interview is up to you to make it happen. So how do you make it happen? First of all, always come prepared with some questions about the company, and questions you may have for the person who's interviewing you. Now, don't think that you have to come up with the best question in the world, but it shows that you've done some homework and that you're interested. And so I would say that's step number one. Now, I remember way back then in my, when I was graduating and having interviews. And I remember this gentleman, he was a young actuary, maybe he had, I don't know, seven years experience. And said to me, he said, Jose, you're going to find that very interesting. You're going to go through interviews, and there are some jobs, you will want them so badly. And there are some others that you'll be so-so. And between the ones you'll get and the ones you didn't get, you'll find that it's, what happened? I thought that it went well. And that stuck my whole career. And basically he was saying, you look at the company from one way, but they know how it's happening internally. And then they see, don't think that it's not because you're not good or this and that, is they know who you're going to be working with. And then that may tailor the type of candidates that would fit better. And it has nothing to do with, I would say, with your grades and so forth. And I remember he, when he told me that, and, as an aside, I had a job with them, and the interview went so well. And I had another offer where the interview was a lot more dry, but the other one was what I wanted. It was consulting, and fast forward when I took the consulting, and it was a lot more quieter. At the end, I would have probably been happier at the first job, but never have regrets. It turned out that when I moved to New York, I ended up working with people who had been people I would have worked with at the first job if I had chosen that route. So eventually, people all reconnect, because as Andy said, as we grow within the profession, like the similar nature and minds, usually they end up together. So that's what I would say with respect to the interview process. And adding to what Mahmoud said, nowadays, there's definitely a bigger emphasis on being able to communicate. In my days, employers tended to look at the exam and only exam, and because it was more hierarchical, and the fact that obviously it's a different market. I was in Canada at the time. The profession was growing, but not at the same speed and not to the same extent as what you will be facing in Saudi. So you will definitely get a bigger exposure. in terms of having the chance and the challenge to communicate. And and this is something the SOA will promote and is also aware of. And it's called and you probably have come across, obviously IQ is your, all your technical and knowledge. But then there's EQ, which is your emotional, how you can communicate. And then there's AQ, which is how you can adapt. In this world that is moving so fast, that is becoming more and more integrated, there is definitely an expectation from employers, from your environment, from your organization, from your peers, that we need to adapt and change and react. And the pandemic has shown that we need to adapt to the circumstances and the challenges we're facing. So I would say bear that in mind, obviously your exam, your emotional skills and adaptability skills as well. So that would be my piece of, my 2 cents of tips for your interview and internship.
That's really great advice. And, we've learned a lot about, the education system, how to, work up to that interview. And now we want to open things up for questions to our audience so that, they may ask any specific questions they may have about maybe Mahmoud and Jose's jobs, what they do, or any other questions that may have come up throughout the course of our presentation today. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of a reminder about how to communicate with us. You can click the raise hand icon if you'd like to ask your question out loud. You can use the Q&A window or the chat feature. Now, I have received some questions in so far, so I'm going to go ahead and start reading those out. And this first one I can answer as SOA staff. So this first question is, if I didn't take the VEE courses in the university, how can I gain the VEE credit? And that's a great question. Certainly, it's not required that a candidate complete VEE at university. It's simply an option. So if you choose not to complete VEE at university or aren't able to get around to it, there are other options that are located on the VEE directory page. It's a separate other VEE options tab, and you can certainly review your options that way, and you can complete those VEE credits outside of university. Next question is, this will be for our actuaries. From your point of view, how do you see the integration of actuaries in the data science field and AI? So Mahmoud or Jose, if you have any ideas, you can go ahead and unmute.
I think Jose will answer this question way better than myself, given her experience.
That's funny. I was going to say, I think Mahmoud would answer the question better than me. So what I can say is, there's many ways to answer that one. But one thing that I'm sure all of you have heard is there's certainly some innovation happening in the world, and it's called fintech or insurtech. And with respect to insurtech, I've been following that market pretty extensively since 2016, 15, 16. I was a mentor to an accelerator. And when it started with the insurtech, it was primarily on the health insurance side. And that's why I was saying, oh, maybe Mahmoud can answer the question better. And when I say health insurance, and I would say just to put it in the big picture is there's a lot of data related to healthcare and massive data related to healthcare that you need to process. So the data science, and either you can build algorithms with it, which you'll go from data to machine learning to AI. And when we say data and big data, there is the data that which is the records you can read, which is what we call structured data. And then there is unstructured data or non-structured. And with respect to healthcare, this is huge. And when I say unstructured, it's your MRI, the X-rays, it's whatever let's say it can be heartbeat and so forth. It's not just like reading employees' record, then there's medical research, there is all sorts. So once you put all this data together, what do you do with it? And then that's where you need to, so that's the first step of data and data analytics and science. And then after that, from that huge data set, what are you looking for? So now you have to ask the proper question, and the proper question will help you solve what you want to solve for. And because the data can be quite overwhelming, and by asking question, you're going to reduce the subset of data that you want to draw a conclusion for or to address the question you're looking for. So it's fascinating. But back to InsurTech, that was healthcare, and then a lot of startup in the general insurance. As I say, you know, car you can put chip, or a house you can put sensor. You can do all sorts of things. While when you're looking for life, I don't want to make life insurance simple, but as I say, it's one event. It's either you live or you die. So now the question is when. Okay, how long will be your retirement, or sadly, how soon or not so soon? And that's the medical advance again, that's going to help determine how long we're going to live and when we're going to die. And quite frankly, sadly, the pandemic has added a whole new set of data that will need to be processed by governments, by insurance companies, by all sorts of people. So again, you can become a data scientist, but it is quite known that the insurance world that we're in is an extensive user of data. And therefore, your actuarial science skills and your data skills can be combined together.
Tiffany, we have a question too from the audience, someone who has raised their hand. So I'm going to allow them to talk.
Great.
This is from Shout Fahad. And I'm asking to unmute right now.
Mahmoud gave an advice of studying to actually learn and apply it in the workplace. So based on that, my question is, how similar are exam problems to the actual challenges and problems in the workplace?
So this is a very good question. I think there are knowledge that you will apply directly to the workplace. I remember when I studied for the STEM exam, I could relate certain project that I studied for or I worked for with the material that I was studying for. Credibility, for example, reinsurance, calculating the deductible and the limit. So there are definitely most of the topics will be applied directly to the workplace. But most importantly, it's about the way we tackle the problem. This is what we are going to learn the most from the exams. So the way to tackle the problem, what are the assumptions, how to check the data, and so on. So this way, we will be giving tools to be able to use it and customize it depending on the project. So there are, to answer your question, in short, there are parts that you can apply directly, definitely, and there are parts that will help you in general how to tackle problems, how to think about it, and how you communicate it. For example, in FAB, FAB actually was one of the most interesting courses to me because its core focus was how to communicate properly, how to check the data, how to check the assumptions. After you complete the project, what you should do next. So everything basically non-technical, which can be applied directly in the workplace. Yeah.
Okay, so now we have another question from Ms. Amani Al-Fayidi. So what is your day-to-day work like? Is there a daily routine? Are there some critical problems that don't repeat every day? What does your day-to-day look like, Jose and Mahmoud?
So there are two parts. There's part that is a routine that we do it every month. For example, the reserving by the end of each month or each quarter, the annual pricing exercise. This is a routine in a sense that you will need to repeat it periodically, but every time you will find different issues when you do that part. And there is a project that come one in a time, like when we worked with the pandemic. It was a shock to all our models. It was a completely new problem to us from an actuarial point of view, how to tackle that, how to price for it, how to reserve for the drop of claims that incurred because of the lockdown, how you can forecast the deferral in the future. So it was something new. Of course, sometime you get it from, you work on a completely new project when there are new regulations, whether from our regulator SAMA or from CCHI. So it's kind of both. Some of them are periodic report that you need to run, and some of them are new problems that you need to solve and work on.
And Jose, did you have anything else to add about, maybe your role? You're an FSA, so maybe your role is a little bit different. Your day-to-day is a little bit different. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I had a role, I had at times roles similar to Mahmoud. And, but as Mahmoud said, obviously we don't wish a pandemic, but there was your job that's going to keep you busy, which might be routine, but there's always a side project coming in. There's always one or two, and sure enough, they're interesting, and you have to juggle between the two. Now, since I created my company, obviously I'm more in a position to decide what I want to work on. And when I say I'm more in a position, the flexibility is interesting, but if I give you an appreciation of how my day started today, because I suspected I would have that question, but it's going to give you some insight. So it started with receiving a reply to a CEO in Poland following the acquisition of the company he is at. So, and obviously I used to work with that CEO. So that was interesting. Then from that one, then I read, like everybody, probably you heard, Credit Suisse had the $4.7 billion loss, where the chief risk officer sadly has been let go, and same thing with the head of investment banking. Now, one of my friends in New York is just starting in the risk function in 2 weeks. She's not an actuary, but since I've done banking, I'm linked to these people. And this person now is wondering about her boss's boss. So that's another one. Then one of my pension actuary in Canada just received a phone call to switch to another actuarial firm to be in wealth management, and asking me, what do I think about this? And then I was preparing to meet with you today. So all of that to say that I went from Europe to New York to Montreal to Saudi. So if you want your profession to be global, it can be global. And the beauty of the actuarial science as a field, it's not like being a doctor or being a lawyer. You're not subject to local consideration, if I may say. I always say 1 + 1, as far as I know, is 2 in French, in English, in Arabic, and Chinese. It's not subject to different legislation and so forth. So your day, so for me, it definitely fill in on my global, I would say the global role I play. Now, globally, what's happening in the insurance space is there's a lot of consolidation. So there's a lot of M&A activity, and that's where all these questions are coming. And right now, I'm working on an M&A transaction, and that's going to be tomorrow. I have my weekly call. And whether it's a small insurance company or a big insurance companies, if you read the news, there is some consolidation. It's growing in your area, but in this part of the world, whether it's in America or if it's in Europe, there's a lot of consolidation. So there's a lot of, I would say, I don't want to say it becomes routine, because any M&A activity has its own, I would say, strategic intent as to why a company wants to sell or why a company wants to buy. But you're going to be involved there. For me, That's something that belongs to my routine. And right now I'm closing one and I'm waiting for another one to kick in. So that's one aspect of my day-to-day. Then my second is the volunteering, and that's what I'm doing with the SOA. And third is to stay engaged in the startup world, which is something that I touch upon. So my typical day, I moved from on those three topics. It's not 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It's just depending on the availability and the time of the day.
Great. It's good to get perspectives from both you and Mahmoud about, what your days look like. It sounds like there can be a lot of flexibility depending on what your priorities are. So that's all really great to hear. Now we have time for a couple more questions. We're going to go a little bit later because it started a little bit later. So next question is it possible to pass too many exams before applying for your first job? For example, would you give you advice to do other activities plus exams or focus all your time on exams? I guess as someone who may employ or be interviewing actuaries for a first job and looking at that resume, what kind of items do you expect on there aside from exams?
And for me, I think the healthy number of exams that you can pass before you join your first job, I think 2 to 4. But if you can pass, I never seen anyone who passes more than 4. If you can do it, that would be great. But usually from 2 to 4, that should be the average range. When I look to a resume, if someone had an internship position and they are applying to the first position, I think we always focus on what that person did in their internship. And sometimes I hear great stories about students who use this opportunity to take initiatives and to act like an employee when it comes to commitment and it comes to challenging things. So doing that will definitely help you to earn your first job. I didn't have the chance to talk about internship, but I think it's a great window for you guys to prove yourself, to test the company, to apply what you have learned, to challenge things there, and to prove yourself. So please use this opportunity, not just like a summer training for a couple of months and then you go out of that company. Prove to them, show them what actuaries can do, and use this opportunity. If you didn't get hired in the same company, you will definitely be talking about your experience and stating your experience in the first interview when you apply for the first job. Yeah.
Yeah, these are all great insight. And as Mahmoud said, you have to have the right number of exam. And when I say the right number, having too many may not necessarily be a good thing because there's going to be a disconnection because the materials sink in better when you can work in the field. And that's why having the internship can really help. You're fortunate to have access to internship. When it was my case, there had not that many. So as a result, I didn't have the internship, but and I was one of those who started with I had passed a lot of exams, so it helped. But then because it's hard to combine working and studying together, but I basically compensated from the fact that I didn't have the internship to get the material through exam.
All right, so we're talking about the goal of having an internship before graduation, maybe a couple of exams. Now, our last question will be about how to complete exams while you're at a work environment. So probably everybody who's attending this webinar today is at university studying, possibly taking exams. But Jose and Mahmoud, how do you balance the challenges of holding a full-time job as an actuary and completing exams at the same time? Do you have any advice that way, or does your workplace provide any assistance with that?
I think if there is a will, there is a way. So it's very important that if we really want to complete our exams and to be a fellow, then we'll definitely do it. It's not easy, especially if you have a full-time job. It will require a lot of energy. Sometimes you have to work late, sometimes you have to work in weekends. But if there is a will, there is a way. I think very important, as I mentioned, is to make it into a routine. So please, for me, I like to study in the morning. Jose mentions she likes to study after working hours. So whatever works for you, as long as it's a routine, you need to stick to it. It will be difficult, but you should always try to meet your plan and commit to it.
Yeah, what I can say is when you live in Canada and it's very cold outside, it's easy to stay inside and study. So that's why that was one of the benefits of the weather. But no, joking aside, I would say what is very important is make sure you have like a group of friends. And so that when they call you, they're doing the same thing as you do. So it's easy to say, okay, let's wait for 2 hours and you have an objective. You're going to be saying, okay, I'm studying 2 hours, and after that we meet and we can do something. And that helps in keeping up the balance. You can complain together, you can exchange tips, you can pass resume, summaries and so forth. So it really helps to have a group of friends that share the same, I would say the same pain or the same fun, depending how you want to look at it. But those friends will help you. I remember one saying to me at some point when I had moved to Paris, because they were not all with me anymore. And I remember this one said, Jose, don't question yourself, just do it, just do it. And that's what Mahmoud just said. You have to be committed, because if you start questioning yourself, you're going to be wasting time, and it doesn't help either. So at some point, you just have to put your head down, go through the material, and as repeating, when there is a way, when there is a will, there is a way, and eventually you'll be very proud of yourself. That's what I can say. And we're not asking Andy, but I suspect Andy has similar stories.
All right, and actually I want to ask Andy just one last quick question, because we didn't really talk about timelines as far as when a graduate can expect to achieve ASA and FSA. So Andy, I'm wondering, could you maybe talk a little bit about average time to earn the ASA designation and the FSA designation from there?
Yeah, well, so it'd be interesting to talk to Mahmoud on his experience. I know averages, as with any average, as we as actuaries know, there's a lot of variation around the average, but typically I think we're finding it's sort of 4 to probably more like 5 or 6 years to become an ASA, and then another couple years, so 7 or 8 years for FSA. But I will tell in my experience from start to finish, for me, it was 10 years from when I took my first exam to when I finished my FSA. I don't know, Mahmoud, are you, or I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you be willing to share how long it took you to become an ASA?
I started the first exam in the second year of when I was a student. So it was on and off. So I started in 2012. It was on and off. And then when I started my internship of 9 months, I stopped the exam. I tried to focus on the learning on the job, which helped me a lot, because it's very important that you study exams and pass. It's also very important that you learn on the learning from the job. And after that, I started to work here after graduation. Also, the first 2 years I paused studying for exams because I really wanted to focus on understanding the sector very quickly. And then after that, I resumed studying until I became an associate. And now I'm studying for fellowship as well. So hopefully a couple of years, as you guys mentioned, should be enough.
Good. Well, and I know, that I have some friends who've said that they never wanted to fail an exam. I don't think there are very many people who can say that. I know I failed one exam, well, 3 times before I passed it the 4th time. And so I say that because I think it's important for people to understand that it does, as Jose and Mahmoud have said, it takes a plan, it takes discipline, it takes will to actually work your way through the exams. And so you don't want to just push yourself and if this is the career that you've decided, you have to show perseverance and keep working at it. And even when you feel like you've done everything to study, you kind of, and you get a 5 again, then you kind of pick yourself up and say, all right, well, I can get it next time and work on it. So I know that was my experience it was one particular exam that really made me struggle. But then when I passed it, I actually passed it with a 10 finally. So that was, I finally conquered that exam. So anyway, I think the point is that everybody has a different pathway to getting there, but typically it is sort of, let's say 7, 8 years to maybe to 10 years to get all the way through. And so it is a big investment, and we understand that. So I think with that, as Tiffany said, we're running out of time. And so we thank you all for taking time out of your evening to join us. We thank you for the invitation from Ali and the Actuarial Club at King Fahd University, and for the opportunity to present to you all. We're sorry that we weren't able to get to every question. We apologize again for the technical glitch in getting this started. We do look forward to communicating with you in the future. And if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to us and send us emails. Sophie can be contacted directly, or I'm sure you can find many of us on LinkedIn. I know I had many of you connect with me on LinkedIn, and we're happy to connect that way and have further conversations and help you, because we want you to succeed as actuaries, if that is the desired, the track that you're taking. So Sophie, any last cleanup that we need to do or wrap up?
No, but I have one question came in that you can answer real quick. So they're wondering, which exam was it that gave you the hardest time?
Well, it's not an exam. It's actually, well, it's not the current. It's not under the current system, but it was related to what used to be called the life contingencies exam. Although when I took it, it was called course 150, so it was a
long time
ago. But I guess it would have been sort of some of the topics that are under LTAM and a few other things right now, maybe a few other things mixed in. And I don't know why I had such trouble, but eventually I made it. And so I'm pleased to say that I did get through it with a 10 when I finally passed it. But I think I got 3 5s in a row before that. So anyway, but all that to say, persevere even when you struggle, because the career is rewarding once you actually get to and through the process, but of getting the exams and getting to the end. So thank you all. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you, Ali, for the invitation, and Sophie for helping set this up. We appreciate all of you for your participation today, and have a good evening. Thank you.